Hi there, my name is Michael Lee, and I'm the Senior Product Designer in the Editor Group. And today I'm going to be talking about iterating on settings. And you'll probably be thinking, why is a designer in the Editor Group talking about settings? So 6 months ago, our group actually uh, was asked to take on some of the responsibility of taking a look at improving the usability of settings and navigation, and more importantly, trying to find ways to improve our scores, this system usability score um, over um, over time. So, jumping into it, um, specifically with settings, some of the feedback that we got in our SUS surveys were how do I find my settings? Like using search was not a really good way to find settings. Our global search was limited in finding settings. When you're on the settings page itself, if you try to use, there's no search tools. If you try to use the browser, you can't search it because for all the items that are collapsed, the browser can't find it. And over time, this area has grown organically. And because of that, there have been areas where you might find merge requests in general, but not everyone might associate it with that. So there's a lot of things going on here. So we were given a list of priorities, which kind of broke down through these themes of information architecture, searching settings, and accessing settings. So this is layouts and interaction patterns, as well as navigation to and from um, the settings. So these three themes also came with lots of issues. Issues everywhere. Years and years of issues of things just building up over time. And thank you so much to Rihanna for doing a lot of interviews with designers, kind of collating all the issues together so that we could even tackle this in some kind of sane manner. So what we did initially was our PM, Eric, Catherine in research, and myself kind of just broke off and just went through all the issues in our own ways. And through that, we had a few meetings to try to find what do we want to do based on the issues that are at hand. So this is with the mindset that we were just aiming to improve SUS. So we're trying to look for high wins, plus also know that our engineering counterpart, we're going to be at 50% capacity of like actually doing the work. So we were trying to pick and choose the right battles. So looking at the priorities, we kind of looked at layouts and patterns because it seemed like there's some quick wins there. Accessing, like how do you get to the settings better? Settings search was another area that we thought we could improve on. And then settings information architecture, we kind of left lower because each one was specific to the group, and we were like not 100% sure of where things would go 6 months ago. So we kind of set this off as like a safe place to start for our group. So we were tentative to start, but we started one issue at a time, trying to find that first move that we felt comfortable with. And that was looking at standardizing the patterns for settings. So this is looking at settings from the project group um, levels. There are other areas of settings, but we were just mainly focused on the project and group level settings. And two themes that we kind of derived was like improving discoverability of the settings. So on the page itself, trying to remove the expand collapse button so that once you land on the page, at least you know what you can do or see or interact with. And the other part was reducing the overwhelming amount of information on the page. So some ideas that we have around this is introducing progressive disclosure for like add and editing content, perhaps having a read-only or summary view of settings if you're not permission to change it, changing the layout so that it's easier for seeing the different sections on the page, and then aligning tables and lists so it looks consistent across the page, and then dealing with providing feedback when saving. So this is handling rules around should we have save changes for each section, or how should toggles work, and trying to make recommendations around that. So we did solution validations based on kind of like where we thought our big vision was going to be. So this is like, instead of editing within the page, we have this like reduced view of settings showing only what you need, and then having modals for add and editing. And it was pretty well received by participants. So based on this, we kind of had a good idea of like, this could be the future of where we're going. It wasn't the exact solution, we know that, but it was like, it gave us a good goal to head towards. And luckily, I talked to people, and talking to other designers through coffee chats, surprisingly, like the settings will come up, and like that's what designers do. And yeah, from one person talking about one thing or another, I shared with them what I'm working on with settings, and they're like, "Oh, I'm doing something similar. Maybe I can try adopting some of these patterns for what I'm doing." And in this, it actually exposed a lot of edge cases that our original thinking didn't cover, and extra scenarios where, um, if the tables are really big and we can't squish them into the right side, we have to handle that scenario over the long term. So this, I'm really appreciative to the designers who took the time to try to use the design direction and try it out in their space, so that will help down the road once we document this in pajamas. And the other thing that we looked at was reducing information per page. So one way of doing that is changing the layout and content, but the other one is just to rip it out completely. So an example of this is with merge requests. At the moment, it lives within the general section of settings. But when we looked at the layout, we're like, merge request has a lot of things going on in there. And it's such a key component of our product that it feels like it deserves its own page. We did a solution validation that kind of forced people to find merge request settings, and they were able to find it within the submenu easily. Um, and then Pedro kindly shared that a similar insight was gained in his CMS study on merge requests. So, two groups coming to this similar conclusion, that's just another vote of confidence to say, yeah, this is a good idea to move forward with. So while all that was happening, our engineers on our team showed an excellent bias towards action, because one day I got this message about, hey, can you try this feature locally? I love your thoughts to see how you can improve this implementation. And this was in-page settings search. This is not searching every page in settings, it's just searching that one page. But the big thing that it solved was it allowed you to look up content on the page, whether the sections were collapsed or not. So this was a big win in understanding or opening up the possibility of helping people find settings on the page, even with our current pattern. So yes, that was a great MR. And it also gave us this exposure to having search at the top, just to see how that would go in the long term. So we released it under a feature flag in the handbook repo. And then recently we extended this feature to all settings pages, and it's available on gitlab.com now. So this is good because it helps us learn as we kind of figure out the problem together as a team. So mapping all these actions in the past month back to our priorities, accessing layouts and patterns, we explored the patterns, did some solution validations, explored it in real scenarios with real issues and finding edge cases. And because of that, we haven't pushed hard on the future direction yet. We're still trying to work out cases there. Accessing navigation, so introducing a submenu item for merge requests under settings, setting search. Right now we have in-page setting search, and then the information architecture. So part of that is taking out large pieces of content and putting them into page specific areas like merge requests. So our team was also looking at settings and navigation. So for every move that we made in settings, we probably made 2 moves in navigation. So if you were looking at this one, settings, where there's a submenu item, In my other half, I was also looking at putting settings into the product menu. So this idea of having settings in this area has this idea of like, if I'm looking in a certain product area, then if I want settings for it, I don't need to jump all the way to a settings area. I can just jump to the most relevant settings from where I'm at. And yes, they're very, very similar. In some cases, maybe a duplicate. And we recently did a solution validation where we looked at our in-page search and extended it out to searching all setting pages. And for this, we explored this idea of having like a tabbed approach to this. And yeah, this was well received. And we're like, yeah, this is a really good idea. But wait, we also have global search with settings. So you can actually get to some settings in our global search. So what's up? Global search with settings or searching all settings? They're very similar. So what are we going to do? Why not both for the short to medium term? And the rationale for that is that we're still learning and we're still making some changes. And having this is an example of if we keep our centralized settings areas for merge requests, we can start experimenting with the layouts and content and information architecture of what settings we put in where inside the centralized spot and provide a path to this page from the product. And once we're more confident and sure of like what needs to go there, then we can start making that decision. So we are delaying the decision to choose one or the other in the spirit of learning and finessing what goes in our settings. And this goes the same with our search. If we have global search, you're going to have to find the search results somehow. And right now we have everything in our left menu. But there are some times when you search for a setting, like the word integrations, it could appear up in 5 different categories. And we're not really sure which one is the right answer. And this is one way of showing search results. And this is similar to how we do search results right now in our global search anyway. So we're just lifting that pattern. But these two things give us the flexibility to test and learn as we go. And once we get more confidence, then we will make a stronger decision at that point. But at this time, moving like this feels like it allows us lots of safety and agility at the same time to like make changes, pull back. And once we're more confident, then we can make those changes. So what's next? Yes, we can make moves now. And this time, not as a tentative cap, but with more purpose and determination. And what does that look like? So going back to our themes, what we're going to be looking at with accessing layouts and patterns is taking all the learnings that we've had for the past 6 months and documenting them as guidelines as our North Star in pajamas to help groups collaborate on settings easier. So expect some pings from me over the next few weeks around new documentation within pajamas, around patterns, around settings and navigation settings. So that's that. Accessing navigation. Because settings and navigations, our group is looking at them very closely. And in the navigation world, there are a few patterns and interaction patterns that are kind of drastic from the current experience that we're going to look at. So there's no issue here, but I'm going to be creating that over the next few days. But that's going to look at comparing and contrasting 3 or 4 different navigation patterns. And based on that, then we can figure out a good place to put links to settings from there. Because one thing with the left nav is the more links we add on there, we're kind of just creating a really, really long menu. And we don't really want to do that as well. So that's what's going on in our heads there. Setting search, we're probably going to start some group discussions to see how we want to proceed with combining the pages because there's a lot of legacy code in there and we want to know what's the best way to do that in coordinating with the different groups, but also at the same time, how we might integrate this with global search in the long term. And with settings information architecture, we looked at just lifting and shifting current settings areas into their separate pages. But this issue down here is looking at more closely at how we're categorizing the content within the settings pages and which settings are actually there and if they're in the right category as well. So that is the story of the last 6 months in settings, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much for such a great presentation about such a large topic. One question I had immediately, because we are going to have maybe a couple of similar initiatives coming up in the future, for example, looking at to-dos and notifications. Is there anything from a process perspective that now when you're looking back at how you did this, that you might have done differently?
I think what really helped our group was because this is so big and there's so many things that you can change and do, that having that kind of theme or agreement on the theme from stakeholders to the group kind of helps dictate the path. At least that will help with selecting which issues to tackle, which areas to tackle, because within all this, there are other areas within the world of settings that we just didn't touch because we felt that it wouldn't move the SUS scores on the long term. And hence we're tackling areas like merge requests more so than other areas.
Cool, makes complete sense. I think Rayana has a follow-up.
Yeah, and related to other areas and other things that are happening today, the technical writing team, they're working on updates, right, to improve the UI copy of settings. So I'm just curious to know, where does this fit with the things that you're doing today, or if it's more like a side initiative that will be incorporated on settings as we work on the overall improvements that you're suggesting here.
So I'm not 100% sure what the side project you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm talking about the KR. We're going to have now for Q2 that will be to refactor the UI text on project and group settings pages. I linked here in the agenda. I think it's still being, not sure if it's still a draft, but there will be an audit that they're going to continue to perform on settings. So I'm just curious to understand how would that fit?
Oh, okay. So with the content and UI, with the text, at the moment, I would think that they can happen in parallel because we're not looking at structurally removing any settings or changing out the world a lot. If there's any improvements to the copy to make it more clear, moving away from question marks to learn more, like maybe that's one of the examples, but these types of things can happen independent. And I think this is where we just need to be transparent of what we're doing. So maybe it's a component, or like maybe it's a pattern that we define, like this is how you're going to add content, like add an item to a list of existing settings. Make some rooms so that there's a description area or like helper text or whatever that needs to be. I think that's where it's going to go. I don't have a strong point on what the copy should be because we're the editor group, and I think the settings and copy itself should like then be delegated back to the group responsible for those areas because they know what's going on there. So maybe I don't like the word trains and I call it something else, and that would mess up everyone's world. So we shouldn't be dictating that level. We're dictating more at the higher interaction kind of component level patterns.
Yeah, makes sense. Thanks for clarifying.
I think Nadia, you have the next one.
Yeah, I just wanted to link the issue here for the drawer of the pipeline editor, given one of the explorations that you showed had the sidebar with quick access to the most used settings. So this is something that we will also probably consider once we have the drawer. And our plan is to leverage it to provide the most important tools, including settings within the UI of the pipeline editor. So just, just want to highlight that. And also, I really liked your approach of why not both. We recently used it on the pipeline authoring team as well, when we moved the CI linter to the pipeline editor. And what we did, we just moved it as is into the pipeline editor as a tab, and it still exists in its original location, and it's used in both. I'm actually not sure if we'll be removing the original placement anytime soon, because it seems like it kind of serves different workflows sometimes.
Yeah, and that whole idea of different workflows is probably like the discussion that goes back in our group a lot around, should the link to settings be within the product area, or should it be in like a centralized spot?
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, Nadia, I think some of the work that you've done with the drawer sidebar thing was the inspiration for us to adopt and like push harder on the side drawer, the drawer pattern as well. So thank you for that.
I'm just gonna
let's see.
I'm just going to pass my comment just to cross share the information here. We had a think big last week about also settings and UI configuration, the settings, and the YAML file configuration. And just linked here the agenda doc. There's also a video I'm going to link afterwards where the PMs were exposing like where does this happen in Verify and across ops, and how can we fix it, right? With the low-hanging fruits from their point of view. Just so you know, I'll ping you in the conversation so I don't take up so much time from our call today.
Great, thank you. And then Daniel, you have one question there?
Yes. First of all, thanks for this presentation. It's really extensive work that is really complex to break down. It was really nice to see how you presented it. It's more of a suggestion and a question if you have ever thought about implementing aliases in the search, right? So if a user search for repos, then we can interpret that they probably want to know, find more about repositories. I think this can help users who are not sure what they're looking for, and help us better match their mental model, right? Because it can just feed alternative words on the back end, and then it will bring up the options we have. And it also can make the search more resilient to changes in copy, right? Just as we change the copy, we can keep the previous versions in the back end. So if the user searches for the old term that we used, it will still bring up the desired result.
Yeah. So at the moment, the in-page settings search is just like a straight keyword lookup. But at the global search, when we looked into it, there's actually like an index page that kind of has a key value pair of like word to page kind of matchup. So that is probably more in the realm of the search team to like help us out with that area. But yeah, and that's probably the discussions that our team will have to do with like global search. And, you know, start off like how do we approach this with the idea of that example, like do we want to when do we want to handle like fuzzy matching and aliases as well?
Got it.
Perfect. I think we're at the end of the presentation. Thank you so much, Michael.
You're welcome. Thanks, everyone.